Hashtag the invisible man who spoke the world's languages. Part 1, The Night Shift. Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart down the marble corridor of Henderson Global Industries, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. It was 11:47 p.m., and the executive suites on the 42nd floor were finally empty. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered like a constellation of earthbound stars, but Marcus barely noticed anymore. He had seen this view 1,000 times during his 3 years as a night janitor, and tonight, like every night, he had work to do. He paused outside Conference Room A, the largest meeting space in the building, and took a deep breath. The room was a disaster. Coffee cups littered the table, papers were scattered everywhere, and someone had knocked over a plant in the corner. Marcus could read the stress in the mess. Something important had happened here today, something that hadn't gone well. As he began collecting the cups, he noticed the whiteboard still had writing on it. Languages. Someone had written, urgent, need interpreters for, followed by a list, Mandarin, Arabic, Portuguese, Russian, Hindi, Japanese, Swahili, Korean. Next to each language was a red X. At the bottom, someone had scrawled in frustrated capital letters, deal falls apart in 72 hours without translators. Marcus stared at the board for a long moment, his hand frozen on a coffee cup. He knew all 8 of those languages. He spoke them fluently. But he was just the janitor. Nobody knew. Nobody had ever asked. He erased the board carefully, finished cleaning the room, and went back to his cart. It wasn't his business. He had learned long ago to stay invisible, to do his job, and to go home. But as he moved through the empty offices, that whiteboard haunted him. Part 2, The Man Nobody Saw. Marcus hadn't always been invisible. Once, he had been Dr. Marcus Chen, a linguistic anthropologist with degrees from 3 universities across 2 continents. He had worked for international humanitarian organizations, translating in crisis zones, helping refugees, building bridges between cultures. He had published papers, given lectures, and had a beautiful apartment in Geneva with his wife, Svetlana, and their infant daughter, Mia. Then came the accident. A roadside bombing while he was working in a conflict zone. Svetlana had been with him, documenting human rights abuses. She didn't make it home. Marcus had survived with physical scars and psychological ones that cut even deeper. He had returned to the United States broken, carrying his 2-year-old daughter and a grief so heavy he could barely breathe. The PTSD made it impossible to work in his field. The panic attacks came without warning. Crowds overwhelmed him. The corporate world, with its politics and pressures, was unbearable. His credentials meant nothing when he couldn't make it through an interview without his hands shaking. Bills piled up. His savings evaporated. Desperation set in. The night janitor position at Henderson Global had been a lifeline. The overnight shift meant few people, quiet spaces, and predictable routines. It paid enough for his small apartment and Mia's needs. The work was simple, meditative even. He could disappear into it. And most importantly, he was home every morning when Mia woke up, could take her to school, help with homework, make dinner, and be the father she needed. Mia was 8 now, bright and curious, with her mother's eyes and fearless spirit. She was learning Spanish at school and would practice with Marcus in the evenings. She didn't fully understand why her father, who could speak so many languages and had so many degrees framed in their tiny apartment, cleaned offices at night. But she knew he loved her, and for now, that was enough. Part 3, The Crisis. The next evening, Marcus arrived for his shift and immediately sensed the tension in the building. Even at night, there were more people than usual, executives working late, lights burning in offices that were usually dark. He kept his head down and started his routine on the lower floors, working his way up. Around midnight, he reached the executive level and found a cluster of people still in the conference room. This was unusual. He started to push his cart past, but the door opened and a woman stepped out, nearly colliding with him. "Oh. Sorry," she said, distracted. It was Sarah Prentice, the CEO's chief of staff. Marcus had seen her many times but had never spoken to her. He nodded and moved to continue past. "Wait," she said, looking at him with desperate eyes. "You work here every night, right? Have you seen anyone, absolutely anyone, maybe in the building services, maintenance, cafeteria, anyone who might speak multiple languages? Arabic? Mandarin? Anything?" Marcus's heart rate picked up. His instinct was to say no, to protect himself, to stay invisible. But something in her voice stopped him. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly. Sarah laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. "Everything. Everything is wrong. We're about to close the biggest deal in company history. 12 international partners from 8 countries, representing a merger that will save 3,000 jobs and expand operations globally. They're arriving in 48 hours for the final contract signing." She ran a hand through her hair. "We had interpreters lined up, but there's been an outbreak of that new flu strain. 14 professional interpreters have cancelled in the last 2 days. We've contacted every agency in the country. Everyone's either sick, already booked, or can't get here in time. Without perfect translation for the contract negotiations, the deal dies. Everything falls apart." Marcus felt his pulse pounding in his ears. "The 8 languages on the whiteboard yesterday?" Sarah looked surprised that he'd noticed. "Yes. We need someone who can handle all of them, or at least most of them. The partners refuse to use electronic translation for something this significant. They want human interpreters they can trust. But we can't find anyone. Not one person who can cover even half of what we need." The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. Marcus gripped his cleaning cart. This was the moment. He could speak up, could offer to help. But then what? Everyone would know he wasn't just a janitor. They would ask questions. They would wonder why he was here. The attention, the pressure, the scrutiny, it would be everything he'd been hiding from. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I hope you find someone." He pushed his cart past her, his hands shaking. Behind him, he heard Sarah sigh and return to the conference room. Marcus cleaned the rest of the floor on autopilot, his mind racing. He told himself it wasn't his responsibility. He had Mia to think about. He couldn't risk his stability, his carefully constructed safe life. But when he got home at dawn and watched Mia sleep, he thought about those 3,000 jobs. 3,000 families. 3,000 people who depended on this deal, who would be devastated if it fell through. And he had the skills to help. He had the exact skills they needed. Part 4, The Courage to be Seen. Marcus didn't sleep. He made Mia breakfast, walked her to school, and then sat in their small apartment staring at the wall. On his bookshelf were photos from another life, him in a UN vest translating for refugees, him and Svetlana laughing in front of the Eiffel Tower, him receiving an award for his humanitarian work. He picked up the photo of Svetlana. "What would you do?" he whispered. But he knew. Svetlana had run toward danger to help people, not away from it. She had believed that if you had the ability to make a difference, you had the responsibility to try. That afternoon, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 6 years. He put on a suit, printed out his resume and credentials, and took the train to Henderson Global during daylight hours. The building looked different in the sun, gleaming and imposing. His hands shook as he entered the lobby. "I need to speak with Sarah Prentice," he told the receptionist. "It's about the interpreter situation." The receptionist looked skeptical. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but please. Tell her Marcus Chen is here. Tell her it's urgent." 20 minutes later, he was sitting in a waiting area, his anxiety mounting. He was about to leave when Sarah emerged from an elevator, looking exhausted and confused. You're the janitor, she said. Yes, Marcus stood up. My name is Marcus Chen. And I speak all 8 languages you need. Fluently. Sarah stared at him. What? Marcus opened his folder with trembling hands and passed her his resume. As she read, her expression transformed from confusion to shock to something like awe. You have a PhD in linguistic anthropology. You worked for the UN, for Doctors Without Borders, for. She looked up at him. Why are you working as a janitor? The question he'd been dreading. Marcus took a breath. I lost my wife 6 years ago. Traumatically. I have PTSD. I couldn't handle the pressure of my old work anymore. I have an 8-year-old daughter who depends on me. The night shift was all I could manage. It kept us stable. His voice cracked slightly. But I heard what's at stake. 3,000 jobs. I can't let people suffer when I have the ability to help. I can do this. I can translate for your meeting. I'm rusty on technical business terminology in some languages, but if you give me the contracts and materials today, I can prepare. I can do this. Sarah's eyes were wide. Marcus, if you can really do this, if you can pull this off, you would be saving this company. The CEO, James Henderson, he's been in crisis mode. This deal means everything. I can do it, Marcus said, with more confidence than he felt. But I need to be home by 6 p.m. each day for my daughter. And I'll need the materials immediately to prepare. Done, Sarah said. Absolutely done. Come with me. Part 5, The Preparation. The next 36 hours were the most intense of Marcus's recent life. Sarah had him meet with the legal team, the executive team, and finally with James Henderson himself, a silver-haired man in his 60s who shook Marcus's hand with barely concealed desperation. I won't lie to you, Marcus. This company has been in my family for 40 years. This merger is the only way we survive the next decade. If we can't communicate with these partners, if there's any misunderstanding in the contracts, the whole thing collapses. Can you really handle this? Marcus met his eyes. Yes, sir. I can. They gave him everything, contracts in multiple languages, background on each partner company, cultural briefings, technical terminology lists. Marcus took it all home and didn't sleep. He sat at his small kitchen table, drinking coffee, reviewing documents, practicing vocabulary he hadn't used in years. The Arabic legal terms came back. The Mandarin business phrases. The Russian contract language. Portuguese technical specifications. Hindi formal expressions. Japanese honorifics. Swahili diplomatic terminology. Korean negotiation vocabulary. Mia watched him with curious eyes. Daddy, why are you working so hard? Marcus pulled her onto his lap. Remember how I told you I used to help people by translating? Speaking different languages so people could understand each other? She nodded. Well, I have a chance to do that again. To help a lot of people keep their jobs. It's going to be scary for me, but it's important. Mia hugged him. You can do it, Daddy. You're the smartest person I know. Her faith in him was a light in the darkness. Marcus called his therapist, Dr. Reeves, and had an emergency session to prepare for the anxiety and potential triggers. They developed coping strategies, grounding techniques, and a plan for managing the pressure. Marcus, Dr. Reeves said gently, this could be incredibly healing for you. Or it could be re-traumatizing. You need to be honest with yourself about your limits. I know, Marcus said. But I have to try. I've been hiding for so long. Maybe it's time to step back into the light. Part 6, The Day Arrives. The morning of the negotiation, Marcus dropped Mia at school and headed to Henderson Global. He wore his best suit, carried a professional leather folder Sarah had provided, and tried to control his breathing. The building lobby was buzzing with activity. International flags had been set up in the conference center. Caterers were arranging elaborate refreshments. Security was everywhere. Sarah met him at the elevator. The partners are arriving within the hour. I've set up a quiet room for you to take breaks if you need them. We have water, coffee, whatever you need. Marcus, I can't thank you enough for this. Let's see if I can actually pull it off first, Marcus said, managing a smile. The conference room had been transformed. A massive table sat in the center, with nameplates for representatives from China, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Russia, India, Japan, Kenya, and South Korea. At the head of the table sat James Henderson and his executive team. And next to them, a single chair marked, Interpreter. Marcus's chest tightened. One chair. All the pressure on him alone. He felt the familiar signs of panic starting, rapid heartbeat, sweating, tunnel vision. He excused himself to the bathroom and used the techniques Dr. Reeves had taught him. Grounding. 5 things he could see. 4 things he could touch. 3 things he could hear. 2 things he could smell. 1 thing he could taste. Slowly, his breathing steadied. He looked at himself in the mirror. You can do this, he whispered. For Svetlana. For Mia. For all the people counting on you. He returned to the conference room just as the first partners arrived. Part 7. When everything goes wrong. The representatives from China arrived first, led by Chairman Wei, a distinguished man in his 70s. Marcus greeted him in Mandarin, offering the appropriate formal welcome. Chairman Wei's face lit up with surprise and pleasure at the fluent, culturally appropriate greeting. Then came the others, one by one. Marcus greeted each in their native language, watching surprise and respect register on their faces. The Saudi Arabian delegation, led by Mr. Al-Rashid. The Brazilian team under Senora Oliveira. The Russian oligarch Volkov. The Indian tech executive Mrs. Banerjee. The Japanese corporate leader Mr. Tanaka. The Kenyan development minister Mr. Aching. The Korean finance expert Ms. Park. For the first few hours, everything went smoothly. Marcus translated contract terms, facilitated discussions, and navigated the complex cultural nuances of each interaction. He explained when a phrase in one language didn't have a direct equivalent in another. He caught potential misunderstandings before they became problems. He was in his element, and the skills he'd thought he'd lost came flooding back. But around hour 4, something happened. During a particularly tense negotiation over profit-sharing percentages, the Russian representative Volkov raised his voice, using aggressive language. At the same moment, Mr. Al-Rashid from Saudi Arabia stood up, offended by what he perceived as a direct insult in the translation. The room erupted. Multiple people began speaking at once in different languages. Accusations flew. Someone slammed a hand on the table. The noise, the chaos, the anger, it hit Marcus like a physical force. Suddenly he wasn't in the conference room anymore. He was back in that dusty street, the moment before the explosion, Svetlana beside him, voices shouting in multiple languages, the chaos, the heat, the noise. Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen. Sarah's voice cut through the panic. Marcus realized he was standing, breathing hard, his hands gripping the table. Everyone was staring at him. The room had gone silent. I'm sorry, he managed. I need a moment. He walked out of the room as professionally as he could, but his legs felt like water. In the hallway, he collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, his head in his hands. The panic attack crashed over him in waves. He couldn't breathe. He had failed. He had let everyone down. Sarah appeared with a bottle of water. She sat down next to him without speaking, just present. Slowly, Marcus's breathing returned to normal. Shame flooded through him. I'm sorry, he said. I can't do this. I thought I could, but... Marcus, Sarah interrupted gently. You've been in there for 4 hours, translating simultaneously between 8 languages for some of the most demanding people in international business. What you've done is extraordinary. You're human. You're allowed to need a break. They were fighting, Marcus said quietly. It triggered something. My wife died in a conflict zone. The shouting, the anger, the chaos, I was back there. Sarah nodded. I understand. But Marcus, look at me. Those people in there, they're not fighting anymore. Do you know why? Because 30 seconds after you left, Chairman Wei stood up and said something in Mandarin. I don't know what it was, but suddenly everyone sat down. They're waiting for you. They want you to come back. Part 8, The Truth Breaks Through. Marcus took several deep breaths, drank the water, and stood up. He could do this. He had to do this. But when he walked back into the conference room, he made a decision. No more hiding. No more being invisible. I apologize for stepping out, he said clearly, in English. Then he repeated it in each of the 8 languages, looking at each delegation in turn. He paused, then continued. I need to tell you all something. I am not a professional interpreter. Until 3 days ago, I was a janitor in this building. I have the credentials and experience to translate for you, but I haven't done this work in 6 years. He saw shock on faces around the table. James Henderson looked like he might have a heart attack. But Marcus continued. I stopped because I lost someone I loved. I developed PTSD. The work I used to do became impossible. I took the only job I could handle and raised my daughter alone. When I learned about this meeting, about the 3,000 jobs at stake, I knew I had to offer my skills, even though it terrified me. He looked at each person. A moment ago, when voices were raised and there was conflict, I had a panic attack. A trauma response. I'm being honest with you about this because you deserve to know who is translating your words. I am someone who has been broken and is trying to rebuild. I may not be perfect, but I promise you this, I will translate your words with absolute accuracy and cultural sensitivity. I will help you understand each other. If you want to proceed with me as your interpreter, I will give you everything I have. If you prefer to wait for someone else, I will understand. The room was absolutely silent. Then Chairman Wei stood up. In Mandarin, he said, I will tell you what I said before. I said that a man who cleans floors at night to care for his child, and then offers his talents to save the jobs of people he has never met, is a man of great character. I said we should be honored to have him here. Marcus translated the words, his voice thick with emotion. Then Mr. Aching from Kenya spoke in Swahili. In my country, we have a saying, a brave man is not one who has no fear, but one who conquers it. You have conquered your fear to be here. That is true courage. Around the table, one by one, each representative spoke in their own language, and Marcus translated. They spoke of respect, of second chances, of the importance of human connection over perfection. Mrs. Banerjee from India spoke of her own struggles with anxiety. Mr. Tanaka from Japan talked about rebuilding after failure.